It was supposed to be a regular day. The morning sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft orange glow over the city. A woman, composed and confident, stepped out of her car in front of the courthouse, walking briskly up the stone steps. Her name was Erica James. She wasn't just anyone. She was a judge, a seasoned professional who had worked her way up in a system that didn't always make it easy for people like her. Today, however, no one would recognize her for what she was. Not yet. Erica had dealt with challenges before. Her career, though filled with accomplishments, wasn't without its struggles, but nothing could prepare her for what was about to unfold. As she entered the courthouse, the energy shifted. The security guard at the entrance, a man named Officer Tom Spencer, eyed her suspiciously. He hadn't seen her before, and that bothered him. In his mind, she was just another person walking into the building, someone who didn't belong in a place where power was so often reserved for people like him. "Ma'am," he said in a gruff voice, his eyes narrowing as she approached the metal detectors. "Step out of line." Erica, not one to back down easily, paused for only a moment. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. He had him respond immediately. His gaze swept over her, from her perfectly pressed navy suit to the confident look in her eyes. Something about her bothered him. She didn't look like she belonged. People like her, well, they didn't walk into a courthouse with that kind of confidence. Not without a little reminder of who was really in charge. "You can't just walk in here looking like that," he muttered, stepping forward to block her path. "No ID displayed." Erica reached into her bag, pulling out her credentials. Federal judge, no less. She held them out, expecting him to recognize the authority she carried. He glanced at the badge briefly, barely acknowledging it, before slipping it into his pocket. "I'd like that back," she said, her eyebrow rising, but Spencer merely ignored her request and gestured to the screening room nearby. As he led her into the narrow hallway, Erica's heart rate quickened. Something wasn't right. She could feel the tension in the air as they approached the small, isolated room. The moment they entered, Erica saw a pair of clippers sitting idly on the counter, their cold steel glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Sit down," Spencer ordered, his tone a little too sharp. "I don't consent to this," Erica said, her voice steady. "You have no legal cause to detain me. This is unnecessary." Spencer, unfazed by her protests, merely grinned. "Cause enough," he said, waving her toward the chair. Erica felt the cold weight of his hand as he guided her into the chair. For a moment she thought about standing her ground, but something in Spencer's demeanor, his smug, arrogant confidence, made her realize that any further resistance would only escalate things. She had been through enough in her life to understand when it was time to pick her battles, but today, it wasn't just about her. The clippers came to life with a buzz, the sound filling the room like a swarm of angry bees. Erica felt her breath catch in her throat, but she didn't flinch, not yet. Not when she knew what had to come next. The clippers buzzed again, and with each pass, strands of her hair fell to the floor. The officers around her laughed as if this was just another routine part of the day. To them, she was just a woman, just another victim to their power. "She looks better already," one of the officers muttered. "She should have come in here with some respect," Spencer sneered as he wiped his sleeve. Erica didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even blink. Instead, she sat in that chair, her dignity stripped away strand by strand, and yet something inside her began to burn with purpose. She knew that they had made a grave mistake, and it wasn't just about her hair, it was about something far more important, and soon they would all understand the mistake they had made. She would make sure of it. The moment they were done, Spencer casually opened the door and motioned for her to leave. His face was smug, thinking that his display of power had broken her. But Erica didn't break. Not yet. She rose slowly, hands trembling only slightly, and walked back into the hallway. The silence in the courthouse felt suffocating, but Erica kept her head high. As she made her way down the hall toward the courtroom, she could feel the weight of every step, not because she was afraid, but because she knew the truth. They had just assaulted a judge in her own courthouse, and she was about to make them pay for it. When Erica entered the courtroom, all eyes turned to her. The silence was deafening. She walked past rows of attorneys, journalists, and defendants. Her eyes remained straight ahead, not acknowledging the confusion, the disbelief, or even the pity in the room. She had no time for that. And then it hit them. The woman they had just humiliated? The one who had been escorted through the halls like a criminal? She was the judge? Erica stepped behind the bench, her face calm, her resolve clear. She had taken her seat. The courtroom wasn't just hers. It was about to become the place where justice would be served. Erica took a deep breath as she settled into the judge's seat, her fingers curling around the edges of the polished wood. Her scalp still stung from the humiliation, the remnants of her hair lying in discarded piles on the floor of that cold room. But there was no time to think about that. Not now. Now she had a job to do. A job that she had spent years preparing for, a job that had just become far more significant than any other day in her career. The courtroom fell silent as she looked out over the room. Attorneys shuffled in their seats, nervous murmurs echoed, and the audience, unsure of what had just transpired, was now fully aware that something was different. The woman they had all assumed was just another victim, just another person in the long line of those crushed by the system, was now sitting at the bench. She wasn't there as a spectator or a defendant. She was there to preside. She was the judge. Erica's eyes scanned the room, taking in the shocked faces of those who had witnessed her being led through the halls like a criminal. She could feel their stares, some confused, some uncomfortable, but none of them were quite prepared for what was about to unfold. They had no idea what it meant to face her now. This was no longer a courtroom drama for them to watch. This was something personal, something that would expose the cracks in a system they thought they knew. She cleared her throat, her voice calm and even as she spoke. We will begin today with the testimony in Case 3-412, B, United States, versus Officer Tom Spencer. The silence in the courtroom was thick, but Erica's presence cut through it like a knife. No one dared to speak out of turn. No one dared to question her authority, not after what they had just seen. She wasn't some fragile woman to be torn down. She was a force to be reckoned with. Officer Spencer was there, sitting at the defendant's table, his usual air of superiority gone, replaced by a visible nervousness that was impossible to miss. His eyes flickered from Erica to the other officers in the room, but none of them dared to meet his gaze. They all knew that something had shifted, and they could all feel the weight of the moment. The same officer who had once humiliated Erica was now the one facing judgment, and this time the power had shifted. Spencer's lawyer was the first to stand, ready to speak, but Erica stopped him with a raised hand. I'm not interested in what you have to say about the defendant's character. I'm interested in the truth. And the truth, Mr. Spencer, is that your actions were a violation of not just one person's rights, but of the law itself. The prosecutor's table shifted uncomfortably. The defense attorney looked like he wanted to object, but the room had already changed. No one was backing down, not today. Erica was the judge now, and she was going to make sure everyone knew what that really meant. As the trial went on, Erica maintained her calm demeanor, but behind her eyes was a quiet storm. She was determined to get the truth out in the open, and she wouldn't allow anyone to cover it up. Not the defense, not the other officers, and certainly not the system that had enabled Spencer for so long. The witnesses were called one by one, and each story that came forward painted a damning picture of the officers' behavior. Testimonies of police brutality, racism, and the systemic failures that had allowed Spencer's actions to go unchecked for so long were laid bare for everyone to see. Erica listened carefully to each word, taking notes, never allowing her focus to waver. The case was stronger than anyone had anticipated. But it wasn't just about the case. This was about so much more. Every word spoken, every fact presented, and every action taken in that room was part of a larger mission. Erica wasn't just seeking justice for herself or for the victims in this case. She was aiming to expose the broken system that had allowed abuse to flourish for decades. When the first break came, Erica remained seated at the bench, her fingers tapping gently on the wood, eyes fixed on the defendant. Spencer sat nervously, his lawyer beside him, but Erica's eyes never left him. She could see the shame in his posture now. The man who had once prided himself on his authority was now reduced to a nervous wreck. For the first time, he realized the consequences of his actions. He had crossed a line, and Erica wasn't going to let him get away with it. As the break ended and the room filled again, Erica stood. She turned to face the courtroom, her voice steady as she spoke. "We've heard enough. It's time for us to proceed with the next phase of this case, but make no mistake, what happens next will affect far more than just this trial." The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone was waiting for the next move. The defense attorney glanced nervously at the clock. He knew they were running out of time to make their case. But the truth was out now, and there was no going back. Erica didn't flinch when she caught sight of Spencer again, his nervousness obvious. She knew the game had changed. He wasn't in control anymore, she was. Her voice echoed in the room as she delivered the next set of instructions. "The court will reconvene shortly, and when it does, we will hear from more witnesses, more truths that need to be exposed. Because what you've seen here today, this is just the beginning." The room stilled as the witnesses were called. But it was no longer just about the facts. It was about the people who had been ignored, suppressed, and oppressed for so long. The ones who had been silenced by fear, by power, by a system that told them their voices didn't matter. Today, they were finally being heard. And that, Erica knew, was the true power of justice. Not the verdict, not the punishment, but the truth that came to light, no matter how hard it was to hear. As she sat back down, her gavel tapping lightly on the desk, she looked out at the room one last time. They were all watching. The courtroom had become a battleground, and Erica was ready for the war. As the trial continued, Erica's presence in the courtroom was undeniable. Each word she spoke carried weight, and every decision she made sent a ripple through the room. The witnesses kept coming, one after another, each testimony more damning than the last. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and Erica knew that the truth was finally coming to light. But what she didn't expect was just how far this case would go, how much it would expose not just one man's actions, but the very system that allowed him to thrive. Spencer sat at the defendant's table, visibly shaken, his arrogance from earlier now replaced by fear. He had no idea what was coming next. His lawyer was growing more defensive, their arguments crumbling as each new witness spoke, but Erica was unshaken. She had seen the broken system for what it was, and now she was in the process of breaking it open. It wasn't just about bringing one officer to justice, it was about holding accountable everyone who had allowed this kind of abuse to continue. Erica's mind raced as she listened to the next witness, a fellow officer who had worked alongside Spencer. He looked uneasy, his hands trembling as he spoke about the misconduct he had witnessed. He was the first to admit that he had turned a blind eye, too scared to speak out, but now he had no choice. His testimony only confirmed what Erica already knew. Spencer wasn't an isolated case. This kind of behavior was endemic within the system. When the witness finished, Erica didn't wait for the defense's objections. She knew where this was going. She stood and addressed the room with a voice that commanded attention. "Officer Spencer," she said, locking eyes with the defendant, "you're not just on trial for the assault of one person. You're on trial for something much bigger than that. You've become the face of a broken system, a system that has protected men like you for far too long." The courtroom fell into a tense silence. Spencer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Erica didn't let up. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, could hear the whispers of the attorneys and the audience, but she was focused. on the truth. Today, she continued, this court will not just bring you to justice. We will shine a light on the entire system that allowed you to operate with impunity for so long, and that light will burn through every wall of silence that has protected you and others like you. The defense attorney stood up, his face flushed with frustration. Your Honor, we object. These statements are out of line and irrelevant to the case at hand. Erica raised her hand to silence him. I'll allow it. The facts are clear, and the people need to hear the truth. We're not here just to prosecute one man. We're here to expose the corruption, the power dynamics, and the systemic failures that have allowed this abuse to thrive. The room was heavy with tension as Erica's words settled in. Spencer's lawyer sat down with a huff, unable to counter the truth that was unraveling before everyone's eyes. Erica knew this wasn't going to be easy. The system she was up against was vast, entrenched, and protected by layers of bureaucracy and power. But she also knew that the only way to change anything was to take it on head first. And right now, the best way to start was with Spencer. He had become the scapegoat, the face of everything that was wrong. But he was also the first domino to fall, and Erica was determined to make sure he fell hard. The trial continued with more witnesses. A retired judge who had worked alongside Spencer testified about the many complaints that had been filed against him over the years. Judge Richard Montgomery, an older man with a stern face, described how complaints had been ignored, buried, and dismissed without any investigation. He explained how officers like Spencer had been protected by the old guard, the judges and law enforcement officials who looked the other way, allowing abuses to continue unchecked. Erica listened closely, her heart heavy with the weight of the evidence. The more she heard, the more she realized how deep the rot went. Spencer wasn't just a rogue officer. He was the product of a system that had failed to hold its own accountable. And now that system was on trial. As the day wore on, the tension in the courtroom only grew. Erica could feel it, the energy in the room shifting. It wasn't just about the trial anymore. This was bigger. This was about exposing the truth, even when the truth was painful. Erica wasn't just a judge anymore. She was the symbol of something much larger, the reckoning that had been a long time coming. By the end of the day, Erica had heard enough. The evidence was clear, and there was no more time to waste. She stood, her gavel tapping once against the wood. We will adjourn for today, she announced, her voice steady, but we will reconvene tomorrow, and when we do, we will deliver justice. Not just for the victims in this case, but for all those who have been silenced, ignored, and forgotten by the system. As the room emptied, Erica stayed seated at the bench, deep in thought. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. She knew there would be resistance, even from within the very walls she worked in. But she also knew this: the truth was out now, and there was no going back. She had taken the first step toward a larger change, one that would ripple far beyond this courtroom. Tomorrow, Spencer would face the full weight of justice, but Erica knew that what happened next would be the real turning point. The moment when the system that had protected men like Spencer would be held accountable for its failure. And she was ready. The following morning, as Erica stepped into the courtroom, the air felt different. There was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The room was filled with reporters, lawyers, and onlookers who had all gathered to witness what was about to unfold. The buzz of their conversations created an undercurrent of tension, but Erica was calm, resolute. She had seen this moment coming for a long time. Today, it wasn't just about one officer or one trial. It was about the system itself. Erica sat at the bench, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze unwavering as she looked out at the room. The events of yesterday had left an indelible mark on everyone present. The trial had gone beyond just a quest for justice in one case. It had evolved into something much bigger. People were starting to realize that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight for truth and accountability. One by one, the witnesses filed in, each bringing their piece of the story. A former courthouse employee testified about the long history of complaints against Deputy Spencer. how each one had been buried under the guise of procedure. But it wasn't just Spencer's actions that were under scrutiny. It was the way the system had systematically protected him and others like him. The silence from within the courthouse, from the people who had allowed this abuse to continue unchecked, was deafening. Erica listened intently, absorbing every word. Each testimony was another piece of evidence that supported her belief. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern of abuse that had gone on for years, covered up by those in power. The weight of the responsibility on her shoulders grew heavier with each passing moment. She wasn't just fighting for one person's dignity. She was fighting for the dignity of all those who had been wronged by a system that had failed them. And then something unexpected happened. A familiar name came up in the testimony. Judge Terrence Mahoney, the man who had once mentored Erica, had been the one to sign off on many of the dismissed complaints. The man who had once stood by her side, teaching her the ropes of the courtroom, was now implicated in the very system that had allowed Deputy Spencer to thrive. His name echoed through the room, and Erica felt a wave of betrayal wash over her. Then she had trusted him, had looked up to him, and now she saw him for what he truly was, a part of the problem. Her pulse quickened as she processed the gravity of this revelation. But there was no time to dwell on it. She had a job to do. She had to see this through no matter where it led. Her eyes shifted toward Spencer, who sat in the defendant's chair, his face pale and tense. He could feel the weight of the room's judgment, and Erica wasn't about to let him escape the consequences of his actions. Erica stood and addressed the room once more. Her voice, steady and unwavering, carried through the courtroom. "What we've heard today is not just about one man's misconduct," she said, locking eyes with Spencer. "It's about an entire system that has allowed this behavior to persist unchecked for far too long. A system that has shielded those in power while allowing the voices of the victims to be silenced." The room was silent, the weight of her words settling on everyone present. The defense attorney opened his mouth to speak, but Erica held up a hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses. I'm interested in the truth. And the truth is clear. Deputy Spencer and those who enabled him are guilty, not just of abuse, but of perpetuating a culture of fear and silence." The defense attorney hesitated, but Erica wasn't about to let him derail her. "We are here today to bring an end to that silence. We are here today to say that this will not be tolerated any longer. No more will the victims of this system be ignored. No more will those in power be allowed to hide behind their badges and robes." Erica paused, letting her words sink in. She could see the shock on Spencer's face as the realization hit him. He had no more allies. The system he had relied on to protect him was crumbling, and there was no way to stop it. But Erica wasn't done, not by a long shot. Turning to the court clerk, she said, "Please add to the record the following documents." She motioned to the stack of papers in front of her. "These are the records of the complaints filed against Deputy Spencer and the names of every official who chose to ignore them. These are the people who allowed this abuse to continue. They are just as guilty as Spencer." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The defense lawyer looked like he wanted to object, but Erica silenced him with a single, cold stare. "We will not pretend that this is just about one man's actions," she said. "This is about a system that has failed. And today, that system will be held accountable." Erica paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. She could feel the shift in the room, the realization that this was no longer just a trial. It was a turning point. The silence that had once protected the powerful was now being shattered, piece. As the defense team scrambled to regroup, Erica remained seated, her gaze fixed on Spencer. He had no idea what was coming next. And neither did anyone else. "Let the record show," Erica continued, her voice firm, "that this court will not rest until every person who has played a role in enabling this abuse is held accountable. This is not just a courtroom. This is the beginning of something bigger, a movement for justice, a reckoning that cannot be ignored." She slammed her gavel down, the sound echoing through the room. "This trial is adjourned for today. But make no mistake, it is far from over." As the room slowly emptied, Erica sat in silence, her mind racing. She knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for justice was far from over, and the road ahead would be difficult. But she was ready. She had already made her choice. There was no going back now. Erica James wasn't just a judge anymore. She was a force for change, and she would not stop until the truth was heard, no matter how long it took or how many obstacles stood in her way. The next day, as Erica entered the courtroom once again, the weight of the previous days hung heavy in the air. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. People were talking, whispering, casting furtive glances toward the defendant's table. It wasn't just another day in court anymore. The room had transformed. It wasn't just about a case anymore. It was about the reckoning of an entire system, an institution built on power and silence. Erica was the center of it all, and she felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her as she walked to her seat. The reporters, the lawyers, the onlookers, they were all waiting for her next move. But this time, it wasn't just about them. This was bigger than any of them could understand. She knew this trial was far from over, but what came next was even more significant. The wheels of justice were moving, but it wasn't just about punishing one man. It was about changing everything. About making sure the system that had allowed Spencer to act with impunity for so long would no longer be the same. Erica wasn't just sitting on that bench to judge a case. She was sitting there to ensure that something like this never happened again. As the day went on, more witnesses came forward. The floodgates had opened, and what followed was a parade of stories, each one more chilling than the last. But it wasn't the facts that made Erica's heart ache. It was the faces of the people who had been ignored, discarded, dismissed, the victims of a system that had told them their voices didn't matter. A woman stood up to testify next. Her name was Maya Collins, and she had once been an intern at the courthouse where Spencer worked. She had been one of the many who had been subjected to his aggression, his treatment that made her feel small, insignificant. Maya had never been able to speak up before, but now, with the weight of the truth behind her, she stepped forward. "My name is Maya Collins," she said, her voice shaking slightly, but her resolve clear. "I worked here for a year, and during that time, I witnessed Deputy Spencer's behavior. He wasn't just rude, he was aggressive. He targeted people who were vulnerable, people who didn't have the power to fight back. He used his position to intimidate, to humiliate." Erica sat straighter at the bench, her eyes never leaving Maya. The courtroom fell silent. This wasn't just another testimony. This was the voice of someone who had been silenced by fear, by a system that had allowed Spencer to get away with his actions. But not anymore. "Did you report his behavior?" Erica asked, her voice calm but with a steel edge. Maya hesitated for a moment before answering. "I tried. But every time, I was told that it was just how things worked here, that it wasn't worth making waves, that I should be grateful for the opportunity." Eric's heart tightened in her chest. It was the same story over and over. Maya wasn't the first person to say those words, and she wouldn't be the last. People had been silenced, not just by Spencer, but by the system that had been complicit in his actions. The system that had allowed him to continue his abuse without consequences. Maya continued, her voice gaining strength as she went on. "I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who's been pushed aside. I'm not the only one who has been ignored and dismissed. But I'm here now, and I'm speaking out because this is wrong. We need to stop pretending that these things don't happen." Erica nodded, a deep sense of understanding passing between them. "Thank you, Maya," she said softly. "Your words matter. They matter more than you know." As Maya left the stand, Erica's mind raced. The system had failed so many people like Maya, like herself, people who had been treated like they didn't matter. But today that was changing. Erica wasn't going to let this case be another statistic. She wasn't going to let the stories of these people be buried under a veil of indifference. The defense attorney was growing more desperate by the minute. His arguments were falling apart as more witnesses took the stand, each one tearing away at the defense's case. But Erica wasn't interested in his attempts to distract. She was interested in the truth, and the truth was becoming clearer by the second. She stood once again, addressing the courtroom with a voice that carried through the room, steady and unwavering. These testimonies, these stories are not isolated incidents. They are not one-off events. What we are hearing today is a reflection of a much larger problem, a systemic issue that has been allowed to thrive under the guise of authority. It's not just about what Deputy Spencer did. It's about what everyone who enabled him did. It's about a culture of silence, of indifference, of protecting the powerful while leaving the vulnerable to fend for themselves. The room was silent, the weight of her words settling in. Spencer's face had turned an even shade paler. He knew the walls were closing in around him. His defense was crumbling, and there was no escape. Erica's voice grew sharper. This trial isn't just about seeking justice for one person. It's about holding every single person who allowed this system to exist accountable. It's about making sure that no one ever has to face what these victims have faced ever again. The courtroom erupted into whispers, but Erica ignored them. She turned to the defense attorney, her eyes cold. "You can try to spin this however you want, but the truth is here, and it will not be silenced." Erica slammed her gavel down with finality. The defense team sat back in their chairs, defeated. Spencer had no idea what was coming next. Erica had spent years preparing for this moment, and now it was time to finish what she had started. "We will reconvene tomorrow," Erica said, her voice firm. "And when we do, we will finish this, and we will make sure the world knows that justice has no boundaries." As the room slowly emptied, Erica remained seated. The weight of what had just transpired pressed down on her, but she knew this was only the beginning. The fight for justice wasn't over, not by a long shot. But she was ready for whatever came next, and nothing would stop her from making sure that the truth would be heard. As the trial finally came to a close, Erica James stood tall, the weight of everything that had transpired settling over her. The courtroom, once filled with tension and fear, had transformed into a place of revelation, accountability, and ultimately justice. Spencer, once a figure of power and arrogance, had been stripped of his authority and exposed for the coward he truly was. But it wasn't just about Spencer. It was about the system that had allowed him and so many others like him to act with impunity. Erica's unwavering commitment to truth and justice had set the stage for something far bigger than just this trial. She had ripped the veil off the culture of silence and corruption, bringing to light the voices of those who had been silenced for far too long. And as she sat back at her desk, knowing the fight for justice was far from over, she was resolute. There was no going back to the way things were before. The world had seen the truth, and now there was no turning back. The story of Erica James reminds us all that justice is not just about upholding the law, it's about holding each other accountable. It's about not standing idly by when we see something wrong, and about speaking out even when the system seems stacked against us. Erica showed us that no matter how powerful the forces of corruption may seem, the truth will always find a way to shine through, especially when someone has the courage to stand up and fight for it. And for those of us watching this story unfold, we can take one vital lesson from it. No one is too small to make a difference. Every voice, every action, no matter how small, has the potential to spark change. The fight for justice is ongoing, and each of us has a part to play in it. Now, I want to hear from you. Did this video resonate with you? If you believe in the power of justice and standing up against corruption, hit that comment button and type 1. Let me know if this story inspired you to act in your own life. But if you feel like the content can be improved, if there's something more you want to see, feel free to comment 0, so I can make sure to deliver content that hits even harder next time. Your voice matters. Let's keep this conversation going.